Yeah, that's right. It's one of these again. Oh, geez. Was it been 2 months now? I kind of promised to myself I wasn't going to make another one unless I had something legitimate to say. Well, I've been doing some thinking and I got something to say, alright. I reckon the kind of circumstances I'm about to describe will hopefully never happen again in the history of classics, but I think the lessons that I'm taking are just as important and will always be relevant. Let's just do it. Let's just go. Okay, so I feel like there was something I wasn't extremely clear about in the past, and that is while the president, the head of the club, as it were, might be sort of the head and the face, and sometimes even the heart of the club, they are not the club. Like, I don't know if there's a simpler way to equate that. The president is not the club. Now, you have to organize things relating to the club, figure out what things are most important that the club should be doing at any moment, maybe sending people to do those things. But it's just that. It's the wheelicus, it's the overseer. So if you, as some hypothetical future president, find yourself in a situation where you feel like you're the insider of every single thing that the club does, I would recommend, for your own sanity, to take a long, hard look about not only what you consider important for the club, but what other people are considering important. Because as a club, as a group of executives, there should be that level of feedback. And I can speak from personal experience that when I say that if that feedback is not there, things get hard and slow very, very fast. I know, given these circumstances, part of the troubles that the club has been having is relating to talking to SAC and just getting bare bones ideas off the ground. Basically, just everything happens in slow motion now because of reopening. But it's not just that anymore, and I don't think I can keep using that excuse as we get closer and closer to normal school. The problem that we're just having is a level of basic feedback and understanding that has come from being isolated and online. I think I'm willing to defend it using that because I think a lot of people are still getting used to it. But it is hard for a person to provide a leadership direction without feedback. Now, for those who don't know, I consider myself to be incredibly anxious and paranoid when it comes to most levels of decision making. You can imagine that doesn't help very much when I am currently looking at choices for a university, or currently going through my 1 year late driver's ed course in an online course by myself. Every step that you will take on this journey, that you will have doubt in the back of your mind. I have some years of executive experience, which is more than a lot of people in the club right now can say, but it isn't much. So any choice or priority I decide to set is sort of a shot in the dark, more or less. It's an educated guess, of course, because I spent a significant amount of time evaluating what I consider to be important for the club and what would be best. But that's based on my own intuition rather than any past expertise that has been handed down through the generations. It's a bit of a severance in the link, as it were. And normally this wouldn't be a problem because this is a club, this is a team. Every decision I have made sure to run by as many people as possible. Hey, how does this look? How's this going? And sometimes that works great. I've mentioned before, but I have a lot of faith in the group of people that that we're kind of stuck with. That we are the type of people to make things happen. I think that's just the kind of people that classics tends to attract. But I just think in general, like, there's a pretty positive attitude, and a lot of people are passionate. But you knew there was a but coming. Despite all of this, the level of interaction that I have felt, especially with the online meetings, has been, in a word, abysmal. Part of this is on me for the expectations that I set, Sometimes I can be a little bit overbearing. I'm very aware of that. But also just the basic level of discussion and thoughts that I remember was such a staple of a classics meeting just isn't there anymore. And I think I didn't realize it at the time. Originally, it just kind of felt like, oh, what is going on? I'm throwing all these things out there and I'm getting nothing. I'm banging my head on a wall. I think I didn't really stop to understand what the reason behind that might be. And I think that's just because we're looking at a group of people that really never learned that. I'm not saying that people don't have social skills, although granted, that is also a skill that you have to acquire. I think just based on the precedent set by online classic meetings, it just seems a lot harder to jump in and put yourself out there. I know that because I have had to be the one to put everything out there for 2 months, and I can say that with pretty decent amount of certainty, that I hate it. Now, that's definitely the rudest way I could put it, but I really think I need to stress my level of discomfort, both just because of the person that I am, and just because of the aforementioned lack of classics-related expertise when it comes to upper management. It is a nightmare for me to even stand up and say, classics should do this. And it doesn't really matter what it is, whether or not I actually think it's a good idea. Now, in a normal scenario, that issue gets quickly resolved by someone going, actually, that idea is pretty garbage. I'm going to be real with you. And I'll be honest, I can take that. Like, I'd be a liar if I said that I never had a bad idea. Get lots of those. But that's the problem that comes with a lack of club communication. It's just, you don't get that yes or no. It's almost worse than a no, because then either people just go along with it because you said so, and then it ends up crashing and burning, and people can maybe say, I knew it from the start, but it doesn't really matter if no one pointed it out. And the other opposite is people just go, oh, well, never mind if no one's interested, which I think is a huge shame. We've had things like the newsletter, which just get put out there, and we're like, hey, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. That would be a pretty cool way to talk with people. That sounds pretty awesome. Let's do that. And then, like, maybe 3 people wanted to do it, and then it just went nowhere. It's sort of like, I don't know how many people have seen this. There's a scene in Monty Python's Life of Brian where the People's Front of Judea are discussing their plans now that I think this was probably the point where Brian gets arrested. And they're all discussing, oh, we really ought to do something. And there's just a brilliant, very funny scene where everyone is literally just sitting at the table and everyone is just agreeing with each other that they need to do something. Someone will pipe up and say, I think it's about time we've stopped being sitting down on our butts and really sort this one out, and we should really take some action. And then everyone sort of chimes in agreement, but they're really just talking in circles. They're saying the same thing, that they should do something, and everyone agrees, but nobody actually wants to do anything. It's sort of equivalent to one of my personal favorite memes, which is who wants to crap, who wants to wipe. You can look it up if you want. It's not dirty or anything, but I just think that one's funny. It's also probably more familiar to most people, equivalent to the cartoon character that runs off the cliff, and as long as he doesn't look down, he can just keep running up there, and maybe he can convince himself that he's running in a forwards direction, that he's somehow pushing off the ground and moving somewhere, but the reality is he's really not going anywhere. And in fact, as soon as he realizes that, the first place he's going to go is straight down to the ground, and it is a long, long drop. I guess tying this weird metaphor back to classics, if I feel caught that I am the only one that wants to push really hard on certain initiatives, and then they go nowhere anyways, it makes me wonder if I took the opposite approach and just shut up and waited. The consequence that I see immediately is that the cartoon character just falling to their death. If no one's there to push it forward, does it just collapse? And I would really hate for that to happen. It probably goes without saying that most people would hate that, but until someone's willing to make that kind of sacrifice to start getting this ball rolling, that is exactly what's going to happen. Because I've been looking at these past 2 months, and I really don't think I can push any harder. Not that this is the hardest I can push, but this is the hardest I can push as a sane person that wants to also do good in class and, learn to drive a car and get in a university with some decent marks. There's sort of an expectation that maybe you don't go crazy on a club because, it can't be your whole life. But I'll be honest, it's pretty close as far as these things go. I have never had to think this much about the club or about its future. And the only reason I feel the need to do so is not because I think the club is in any serious danger. I just think that it will be if no one does it. And as I said, I am paranoid that no one else would do so. Which is fair, to be honest. This position was not one that I requested for myself that I thought I'd be good at. But honestly, the reason I took it is because I'm like, well, what's the alternative gonna be? And now that I'm listening back to it, it does sound a little bit egotistic that I'm assuming that somehow that I am the center of the club. And again, to a certain extent, it is true. But this all ties back to, am I seeing the feedback from other people that makes me think, oh yeah, if I put people in charge of stuff, could I trust them to see it through? And there's a couple, sure. But it's like I said, it's been a lot of talk and little action. So we have a lot of people that have some really good ideas and some really good passion, but I don't imagine that passion ever turning into, say, reaching the next generation of classics, reaching the nines, and then that would sort of be the dead end for classics, where all of that passion just kind of fizzles out with those people. And I think that's a huge shame. I'll be the first person to fizzle out. I'll be gone. I could just forget about the club right now and walk away, and I'd probably have a pretty fine rest of the year, and I would just leave and I'd be fine. And the next couple years of people who at least got the classic experience could go the rest of their high school year not caring. Like I said, it would be sad, but it is an option. This is really about the next people in line, because they're the ones that have never had that experience. Not to say that we're necessarily robbing it of them by not being able to provide it, but just that's always what the club has been about. It's sort of the ongoing history, so to speak, that has always found a way to continue to impact people. That's what's made the club so significant, in the way that it's lasted for so long and it's affected the lives of so many people. So it isn't enough just to say that the people on exec are passionate and they have great ideas, because at the end of the day, it's not really about us, or at least it shouldn't be. In grade 11, our hand was kind of forced into that regard because there was really no one else to get to. But the door is now wide open, and aside from the occasional SAC interference, there's really no reason that we need to be caught in discussions with ourselves. It's sort of the argument, like, you can't go exploring other planets until you solve all the problems on Earth. Like, but in this case, it's actually a pretty legitimate concern, where I'm thinking, can we reach out to these nines and convince them that classics is worth their time if we can't even get our own little tiny group of people sorted out? Like, what is the next step for them after they join the classics club? Like, what are they going to move up to? Because if it's this, are they just going to be stuck in the same scenario as us, where no one's going to have any clue what to do? I'm sorry this is taking such a negative tone, but this has all been building up for literal months, and I think it's better that it's off my chest, even if no one listens to this, which is honestly fine. It's sort of like the equivalent of keeping a little diary for yourself. I'll look back on this and probably laugh that I cared so much about this little club, and maybe it turned out fine, and I shouldn't have worried so much. Or maybe it'll fall apart, and I'll think to myself, why did I care so much? This is the wisdom of hindsight and all that. These things just kind of happen, and we make some decision, and when we look back at it, we go, well, that was obviously the wrong one, or that was obviously the right one. What was I so worried about? There's always some judgment we can pass. So I figure at the end of the day, it's not going to make a huge difference because, like I said, this club really isn't about me. No matter what ends up happening, I'll still leave the school. I'll still go to university. Probably hopefully get a nice line of work and maybe live out the rest of my life. And that would be fine. And honestly, that's a pretty tantalizing option because if that is what I truly want, that's truly what I'm after, then it would take a lot of pressure off my shoulders to just forget about all this and just move on. And it really pains me that I'm saying that out loud. It really does make me cringe, and I'm hoping anyone listening feels the same way, because I don't think that's a decision that anyone wants to make on giving up on something that they care about and love a lot. And that is why this is sort of my cry for help. Find ways to get that load off. Interesting choice of words there. But you need to find those groups of people that you really can trust. That sort of net of support. Because it really shouldn't be up to a single person to even if they're not carrying the whole way to the club. Again, maybe I'm exaggerating a bit and maybe it's not as bad as I think, but when I sit alone to faces of silence, it really does feel like the weight of the club is on your shoulders, and it really should not be. Like that is it's not good for the club, it's not good for the mental health of that specific person. It really isn't healthy in any way you look at it. So whether or not that's reaching out for academic support from teachers or whatever, or finding at least a handful of friends you can reach out to, that's what it has to be. That's what I'm trying now. It's a bit unfortunate that like half of the people I would go to are club alumni because they're the only ones obviously that have any idea what the heck is going on. But it's a first step in understanding what a direction to take would be. Like I said, there's really no affirmation on what the right direction for the club is, and really there's no right answer. Anything probably flies at this point. But until the club can learn to take a step forward, just a single one, like I said, we're getting nowhere fast. It's dire times. We're feeling like the worst is over, but it doesn't mean that the work is over. There's still a long way to go before the club can even sustain itself, which is the bare minimum that I set for myself this year. Obviously, we want to end with the club bigger than it was, and what that means is that the club has to be able to sustain itself 1 year, 2 years, 5 years from now. It might look different, and that's fine, but it has to be a positive step. I guess that's it. I mean, don't have much else to say. This all sort of came out as an ultimatum, I guess, in terms of something has to change. These circumstances cannot present themselves again because I don't know if I'll have the strength to pick up my own little pieces up off the ground and enter the gladiatorial ring once more for a smackdown. I think good things are on the horizon, and they will happen, but that little spark of nervousness is never really gonna go away. So either I find some way to make peace with it, or it's gonna be a very short classics journey for me, I guess. I'm really hoping it doesn't come to that, is all I'm going to say. But I guess part of growing up, part of maturing, is you have to learn when to make a tough call, when to let something go. If that means I have to let go of my expectations for the club, so be it. If that means I have to let go of the club itself, again, God forbid. But these are the tough calls that you have to make in tough circumstances. So I will do everything I can before it comes to that. And that is the minimum that I can promise at this point. Oh, good grief. Well, I guess all I can really hope is that either with this message or with talking with alumni or with the teachers or even with the rest of exec that people can sort of feel the same way about the club, that it really it is about the people in it, but at the same time it's about the experience of the club itself. That is the part that needs to be preserved. Passion and drive only really exists in one person. The club is almost separate from that. So if you are like me and you care about the club and you want to see it succeed, then really I encourage you to think about what is the club, what is going to be left when you are gone. Because as my time as a high school student draws to a close, that is the reality I will have to face. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I can choose not to care. But knowing me, it'll always sort of plague the back of my mind on the could have been. So I want to be able to say, no matter what happened, that I did everything that I could have. And I think I have some hope that people might interpret it that way. But mostly I just need to do it for myself. I need to just be able to look at myself and say that I made a reasonable call. That'll involve me sort of just, looking past what others might say. But I think being able to just be honest with myself is definitely far more important than the approval of any other one person or group of people or club related entity. It's a tough thing to do, for sure, to achieve true inner peace with oneself, but that is the priority I've had to set for myself at this point, because that has come at odds with the running of this club, which I knew would happen at some point. Let's be reasonable, but I was really hoping it wouldn't happen like this. So what I can definitely say is that the club is going to change, and however that happens, I can promise that I will be there at the front of it, pushing as hard as I can. What I cannot say is what that end result will be, but I will have to learn that that doesn't matter, at least not to me. For the others, I can't say the same. So if that other person is you, maybe that's something worth thinking about. Hi, it's Sam from the future here. I decided this ending was too depressing to end the video, so I wanted to remind people that classics did in fact change my life, and I don't regret a single second I spent with it. And B, I wanted to tell you a joke. Semper ubi sub ubi. Don't tell a nerd, pass it on, keep the meme alive. Thank you. Good night.